On today's episode, we get to look at the 5 Carolina Hurricanes players to watch for in the 2024-25 season. We're possibly looking at breakouts, bounce backs, and so much more when it comes to the roster this upcoming season. And speaking of rosters, the Hurricanes announced their 2024 showcase group that will be in Tennessee next month as we get closer to some AHL hockey.
You're Locked On Hurricanes, your daily podcast on the Carolina Hurricanes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to a Wednesday edition of Locked On Hurricanes, your team every day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Thank you to the Everydayer for making this your first listen of the day. 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, talking everything about your Carolina Hurricanes. I am your host, Zach Martin. I am the credentialed Carolina Hurricanes beat writer over at the Hockey Writers, where I also do a weekly column on the Chicago Wolves starting this fall called Wolves Weekly. I am the host of the Surgecast, which is a weekly Carolina Hurricanes podcast, along with all of my duties here at Locked On Hurricanes. So like I said at the open of the show, we are going to look at the 5 Carolina Hurricanes players who I think that we should watch for this upcoming season. We could have some guys who are looking for some bounce backs, maybe a potential breakout, who knows, but just overall guys that we need to keep an eye on for the upcoming season. And the Hurricanes on Tuesday afternoon announced their 2024 prospect showcase roster that will be in Tennessee next month, which does feature 14 players that were drafted by the Carolina Hurricanes and some potential PTOs as well. But before we get into all of that, today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off for your first purchase. Terms apply. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Game time. So we're going to kick off the show, talk about the 5 players who I think that we should watch for in the 24-25 season. And one of them, for me, it's definitely going to be not much of a bounce back, even though some people think it is, just because of the injury troubles he had last year. But I think that it's a season we're definitely going to watch for, and that's going to be one Andrei Svechnikov. So now this is not in any particular order. This is just 5 guys who I think that we should definitely keep an eye on. And last season for Svechnikov, 19 goals, 33 assists for 52 points in 59 games. Of course, he started the season late last year, missed the first 3 games after coming back from the ACL injury that he had the season before. Right after the trade deadline, missed all the playoffs and basically missed everything up to the 3rd game of the season. Did get hurt a couple more times, especially against the Winnipeg Jets, where he took a stick to the ribs. And just overall, it wasn't a bad season for Andrei Svechnikov. He was a point-per-game guy when he was healthy. Just it was an unfortunate season for him overall, but a goal shy of 20. Did kind of have a slow start when he did get back on there, but did get 33 assists. Did get 52 points, was still pretty good, all things considered, for the fact that he finished 4th on the team in points. So while it wasn't the greatest season you would hope for a guy like Andrei Svechnikov, who, like I said, did deal with injuries, but finishing 4th on the Hurricanes in points while only playing 59 games is still pretty good overall. I know some people could consider it as a bounce back because, that's not the numbers you would think of for Andre, but I would say it's just a guy we need to keep an eye on for the upcoming season and just see how he does. I know the last couple of seasons he's kind of bouncing around between the first and the second line, especially when you had, Teuvo Teravainen in. Of course, they had Jake Gensel last year. They also had Michael Bunting at some points as well. But if you're looking at the 24-25 Carolina Hurricanes, I would, for the most part, see him kind of cemented on that first line with Sebastian Aho and Seth Jarvis, being for the fact that the top 6 is very different compared to what was last year. I know some people are going to be like, well, it's not that much of a difference if you got Jesperi Kotkaniemi as the second-line center and with Martin Nietzsche coming back as your second-line right wing. You got to figure out who your left winger is on the team, and if you look at the rest of the roster, I don't know if there's anyone right now that could slot into the top 6 that could be it's hard to replace a guy like Teuvo Teravainen, but if there's someone who might slide into the top 6 on this current roster, maybe Jack Roslovic. I would even say, talking to, Nick, aka Kane's prospects, and even talking to Corey Lavalette and a few others, there's a good chance it could be a Bradley Nadeau could hit the top 6, and that's going to be something where it's like, yeah, that's where you would see Andrei Svechnikov being in the top line. And I don't really think it matters who they put as that second line left winger. I think Andrei Svechnikov right now is your bona fide top line left winger because just how the roster is set up right now. And if you want him to have a really great season, especially being with the guy that is Sebastian Aho, who was a point shy of 90 last year, and a season that Seth Jarvis had, I could definitely see where it's like, okay, Andrei Svechnikov needs to hit that next level. We know he has another level to him. Let's just put him on the line with the two guys who were 2/3 of the most lethal front line in the NHL, especially after the trade deadline, when they had, Jake Gensel, and it seemed like those guys were just scoring 3 points each per night as the season went on. So I could definitely see where the case where they're looking at Andrei Svechnikov and being, yeah, like this is where we need him. Power play 1, first line left wing, just get him all the ice time you can get, put him with guys who are going to set him up, and then hopefully see a season where you're talking 25, 30 goals, possibly nearing 45 assists, and you're really having a season where you're talking not like having 52 or anything like that, but you're looking at a season where you're looking at 65 to 75 points, even maybe trying to creep up to the 80 range. I can definitely see a season for Andre where you're looking at a bounce back from 52 points to where you're possibly getting 75, and you're talking a 23-point difference. I could definitely see a 75-point season out of him if he's stuck with Aho and Jarvis for the whole season and playing some power play time as well. So there's a good potential that if it really works out, you might see a 75-plus point season out of Andrei Svechnikov if they kind of have him cemented on that first line with the first power play unit and just basically being with Aho and Jarvis as much as possible, and hopefully kind of see the penalty minutes dip back down because he had 58 last year, which is a lot for being second on the team, only behind Brendan Lemieux, who had 64. So it's definitely a year where you're kind of hoping that Andre takes less penalty minutes, but also starts, being the guy that you saw him be when you draft him, and given the long-term 8-year contract extension. Now, another guy that I've already mentioned so far, and another one that we're really going to have to see a bounce-back season for, is Martin Necas. In the offseason, he did sign that 2-year deal that seemed to get paid $6.5 million per season for the next 2 years. That will expire at the end of the 25-26 season. Last year, 24 goals, 29 assists for 53 points in 77 games. Did miss time last year coming into the 2024 after getting hurt by Dmitry Orlov in practice. Was definitely a slow start for him last year, a year where you saw him lose over an average of a minute per game. And like I've talked about in the last episode of a bounce back season for Martin Necas, you've already heard me talk about it, but we're going to reiterate it again for this episode. This is definitely a season where you're going to have to prove yourself of why you deserve that $6.5 million contract. And it's good that he's excited to be here and stuff like that. Now it's like, okay, show us that level that we saw 2 seasons ago where he had 71 points and led the team. And I think he's very capable of doing that. You're probably going to see him on the second line once again. Him and Jesper Kotkaniemi did pretty well together, even with the confidence line of when they had Andrei Svechnikov with them too. But it'll be interesting to see who they have as their second line left wing. Like I said, it could be Jack Roslovic. It could be Bradley Nadeau if he breaks into the lineup. It could be someone else who might surprise someone out of camp. Maybe it's a trade. Maybe there's an unrestricted free agent or even an RFA that the Hurricanes might go after too. But overall, you're hoping that Martin Necas has a more stable season. Maybe he's back on power play 1, or maybe he's on power play 2, and it could be a situation where it's you could see him back on the penalty kill like we saw 2 seasons ago, and he did really well for the most part. So I was assuming with the conversation he had with Rod Brind'Amour and the fact that he wants to have more responsibilities, he wants to be in a bigger role, but he does know that he has to prove himself to Rod and show him that he's a guy that he can trust, especially on the defensive side of things. Now, maybe KK has a slow start to the year, is kind of struggling, and if Martin Necas can show that he can be a reliable 2-way center that he can somewhat possibly be. I know we kind of see it in international play, but his faceoff percentage last year wasn't great, was under 35%. But the season before was the last couple seasons before it was over 40. So if his face-off numbers get better and he can show a little more defensiveness to his game, maybe there's a potential you could see him at center next year, which would give him more opportunity and responsibility. But I guess we'll see. If we even get a 60 to 65 point season out of him, I wouldn't be upset with it. You would love to see him go back up to 70. It just depends on how the second line's going to be and how Rod's going to use him when it comes to anything related to the special teams and just overall how he utilizes him for the upcoming season. So hopefully we're definitely a big bounce back here for Martin Necas. Like I said, I could definitely see a jump. We were talking about 12 points at least going into next season. Maybe you're lucky in getting back within the 70 range. You would love to see that too for a guy like Martin Necas, who is now going to be under a big microscope for that $3.5 million pay raise that he got to get 6.5 over the next 2 seasons. So those are the first 2 guys we've talked about in Svechnikov and Necas. Just stay tuned right here for segment 2 as we'll go over 3 other guys who I think will either have a bounce back, breakout, or just a season that we would love to watch. So make sure to stay right here in a second on a Wednesday edition of Locked On Hurricanes. Gametime has a new feature called Gametime Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Gametime Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Gametime's 50% off Labor Day offer for Diamondbacks and Dodgers is also something that really should take a look at too when it comes to getting tickets, along with so much more. The one thing I like about the Gametime app is the fact that you get some really great super deals, how good it is, and also the fact of other tiers of deals as well. And like I said, if you're looking at the Gametime picks, the fact that your creation makes it easier to save more on sports, concerts, comedies, and so much more. And they're all in pricing. If you toggle this feature, it shows the total upfront with no surprise fees at checkout. In their seat views, well, obviously this is the feature that I always keep talking about when we do these. And it's the fact you get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy, so there's no awkward angles, there's no obstructive views or anything like that. You know what you're looking at before you even get to the event itself. So make sure to take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL. That's LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. What time is it? Gametime. Thank you for making Locked On Hurricanes your first listen of the day. For your second listen, enjoy the Locked On NHL podcast. Locked On NHL provides you with a national perspective of all things NHL each and every day, with national experts and local insight on every team in the league. Available on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And welcome back to a segment 2 of Locked On Hurricanes, your Carolina Hurricanes every day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. So like I said, at the end of segment 1, we kind of talked about 2 guys in Andrei Svechnikov and Martin Necas. Now we get to talk about the other 3 guys who I think we should definitely keep an eye on for the upcoming 24-25 season. And this guy, I think everyone's really excited for. I don't think this is going to be much of a bounce back. It could be, would you even consider it a breakout season? Maybe. You could maybe say it's a breakout if you're giving this guy more of a 1A type minutes, which, I mean, he did play 42 games last year, started 40 of them. Could you possibly see a jump up in that number or still about the same? But even then, I still say Pyotr Kochetkov is going to be someone they really need to keep an eye on for this upcoming season, where I believe he should be the 1A for the Carolina Hurricanes, especially in the tandem, when you're looking at the fact that he's in the second year of his 4-year deal, $2 million per season. And Frederik Andersen is in the last year of his contract, where he will be an unrestricted free agent at the end of the year. And I think this is a transition year for the Hurricanes, where you're kind of passing on the baton to the goalie of the future. And I think that's Pyotr Kochetkov, because he really showed it last year for the Hurricanes. With Andersen out with the blood clotting issue, he missed 40 games. Antti Ranta was struggling for most of the season. Of course, the defense was kind of struggling to start the year off as well, but all of things considered, Pyotr had a great season for the Hurricanes. kind of helped them weather the storm and stay within in the division race that saw them just miss by 3 points, even for the President's Trophy last year. He had a 23-13-4 record. Like I said, he started 40 games, played in 42, had a 2.33 goals against average. His .91 save percentage tied for the lead of all rookie goalies last year in the National Hockey League. So that's really, really good for him to have a save percentage at .911. And he also had 4 shutouts last year as well. So I think it'd be another good season for him, is just seeing from what we've seen overall in his career, where he comes in 2 seasons ago, has a 3-0 record in the regular season, has a pretty decent, postseason as well, helping out with Antti Ranta. The last, basically his entire time in the NHL right now has been a lot of starting in the American Hockey League, coming right back up and sticking around with the Hurricanes, especially 2 seasons ago and even last year. Like I said, Anderson being out, he only played 3 games with the Syracuse Crunch in the American Hockey League, then came back up and just stayed for the whole season. He knows what it takes to win. We saw him do it winning the Calder Cup with the Chicago Wolves in 2022, and just all of his time in Carolina. He does struggle from time to time. Does give up some goals that you kind of are some head scratchers, but I mean, he's still a young guy, so you can't really. You have to understand the growing pains of being a Russian goalie who's still trying to get somewhat used to the NHL, and things just happen weird. But overall, I think he had a really great season last year for the Hurricanes. Like I said, just looking at a record, we had 4 shutouts in a 23-13-4 season. Led all rookie goalies, tied for it with a .911 save percentage. His goals against average is still pretty good, all things considered, at 2.33. Yes, when Anderson came back, they did kind of swap off every game for the rest of the season. And Anderson did have a 13, wins and had a sub 2 goals against average and had a really good save percentage as well. But in the playoffs, Kochetkov only played in 1 game, and honestly, he did pretty well, all things considered, even though it was an overtime loss, to the New York Rangers in Game 3. But I still think that was a season where you kind of saw why Pyotr Kochetkov should be the goalie of the future of the Hurricanes, and why I believe he should be the 1A. Because it just makes sense at this point for how good he's been. I think it's in a year we were looking at a transition for the Hurricanes, where you had 2 guys on your main defense leave. You had lost some forwards to Nason and Teravainen, bringing a lot of new guys in and stuff like that too, and even Shane Gostisbehere returns for a second run. If you're looking at a transition year where you might see some youngsters come up too and a bunch of new faces on the main roster, it only makes sense to have Pyotr Kochetkov come in and be your 1A and set him up for the future, even depending on if Spencer Martin stays around or they go into free agency next year, or even in a trade going for a possible 1B or your backup goaltender as well. So I would expect a very huge season for Pyotr Kochetkov. Now, the fourth guy we're going to talk about, and this is where you're really looking for a huge bounce back season, that is Jesperi Kotkaniemi. 12 goals, 15 assists for 27 points in 79 games last year. Even he will tell you it was a really bad season for him, where you saw him play second line center for pretty much the entire season. Later on, goes down to the fourth line center for a little bit, goes into the fourth line left wing, was the fourth line center for the playoffs after giving it to Jack Drury, who became the 2C. He had a hot start to the season. It was basically him and Teuvo Teravainen carrying the Hurricanes when they were struggling, but overall, it was just not a great season for Jesperi Kotkaniemi, where you're looking at a situation where you got 6 years left in his contract of $4.8 million, and he's not living up to that contract right now. And, there's a lot of rumors of him possibly getting traded. We didn't know exactly where. There's been talks of possible buyouts, but I don't think Tom Dutton wants to spend 12 years of paying less than $900,000 for him not to play on this Hurricanes team when we already know he doesn't want to waste money. So it's one of those things where you really got to hope that Kotkaniemi can kind of find his game again and have a bounce back year, especially for the contract that he has right now. You can't have a guy making $4.8 million and only putting up 27 points and scoring 12 goals. You kind of have to hope that he has a season like he had last year, where he had over 40 points. Do I think he might do it? Possibly, as long as his line mates stay consistent, because you saw last year, Martin H just struggled for a good part of the season. Teuvo Teravainen, after he kind of came back to earth, kind of, struggled a little bit too for the most part towards the back end of the season. Michael Bunting, was bouncing up and down the lineup before he got traded. Andrei Svechnikov, when he was healthy, he did all right with them before he got bounced around the lineup too, even when they had Jake Gensel come in. And then, he loses his job to Jack Drury in the playoffs and becomes the fourth left winger, fourth center. So this is a huge make or break season for KK, because if he doesn't have a good season, then you're looking at 5 years left at 4.8. Is there a possible buyout next year, or is there a team that's willing to take on that whole contract? Or because I know the Hurricanes don't want to retain, because that's just not how Tom Dunn doesn't want to do business. So this is a very big season for KK, and I hope he bounces back. I hope he does a good job. But right now, yeah, if you're looking at the guy who needs the biggest bounce back seasons on this roster right now, it's just Barry Kotkaniemi, because he really needs it, especially with the contract and the expectations you have on a guy who's supposed to be the 2C and who's supposed to supposedly be the Jordan Staal 2.0 of the future. It'll be very interesting how the season goes. I hope he does well, but it's definitely someone who's really going to have the hope for a huge 24-25 season. And the last guy we talk about, I won't even say it's more of a breakout, because he had his breakout season last year. I think this is more of a continuation of I want to see consistency. I want to see him carry this momentum, and that is Seth Jarvis. As of right now, this recording, he is not signed with the Carolina Hurricanes, still a restricted free agent. And with me and Corey Lavalette talked about, that deal is going to get done. There's no reason to panic. We all know that Seth wants to be here. The Hurricanes want him to stay here. I know Elliot Freeman said that they're not too far off from being done. It's just, tinkering with the deal, which makes sense with the fact that you got to factor in what kind of contract does Seth want, what do the Hurricanes want to do. The cap does go up over the next few years. How they want to structure in terms of a bridge, in terms of a full long-term contract, it all really depends. But we know a deal's going to get done. Seth doesn't want to wait until December 1st when that's the deadline for that. He wants to be on the ice for training camp. He wants to be ready with the guys on opening night on October 11th against the Tampa Bay Lightning. Last season, career highs in goals with 33, career highs in assists with 34, and 67 points in 81 games, where he was a healthy scratch for the last game against the Columbus Blue Jackets. Led the team in power play goals last year with 13, had 10 game-winning goals, only one behind. So he had 9 last year, only 1 behind Sebastian Aho. Did lead the team in goals in the playoffs with 5, and tied for the team lead in shorthanded goals with 2 with Jacob Slavin. And he did all of this playing 60-plus games with a torn labrum and a torn rotator cuff. And then he broke his finger in the first round of the playoffs against the New York Islanders, but still led the team in goals. Talk about a insane 2023-24 season for Seth Jarvis, to where he even said, he's like, I felt I could go through that injury and play well, and he did, and that's what gave him the confidence. And you definitely saw that because of the fact that he had a career high across the board and everything. It wasn't even like 100%. You were talking about maybe 8% and still did what he did. What is a breakout / continuation of a huge season does it look like with a healthy Seth Jarvis? And I believe you're looking at a guy who's has a chance to get 35, almost 40 goals next year for the Hurricanes, and possibly looking at a 75 to 80 plus points. I definitely could see him getting 80 plus points next year. And this is for a guy who played on the first line, the second line, and the third line last year for the Carolina Hurricanes. Second line a little bit, but not a lot, but mostly a lot of first line with Aho and Jake Gensel later on in the season. And then at some points he did play with the Jordans to reignite that line. Absolutely a monster on the power play, huge on the penalty kill as well. He's basically someone who's really turned his 200-foot game into a weapon for the Hurricanes, and someone that Rod Burnmore could really trust. So if he platoons him like he did last year into this season, where he's playing in all the special teams, offensive zone, defensive zone, even strength anywhere he needs them. And if he sticks to the top line with Aho and Svechnikov all season next year, I could definitely see this guy hitting 35 to 40 goals and hitting at least 80 points next season for the Carolina Hurricanes. So I won't even say it's a breakout or anything like that. I think it's just a continuation of building off of last season and having an even bigger career year for a guy like Seth Jarvis when fully healthy, not with a torn rotator cuff or a torn labrum. So those are the 5 guys that I'm kind of thinking that the Hurricanes fans should take a look at for the upcoming season. Andrei Svechnikov to see if he can come bounce back and be fully healthy after dealing with injuries last year. Ken Martinichis proved that he's worth that $6.5 million contract as well. Cam Pyakachekov showed that he is the bona fide 1A of the future. Yeah, huge bounce back here for Jesperi Kotkaniemi when you're looking at a possible what happens next year if he kind of struggles once again. And then for Seth Jarvis, a continuation of sorts. Does he carry that momentum from last year into a season where he's fully healthy? And does he have another career year like he did last year where you're looking at possibly 40 goals and 80 points for the Carolina Hurricanes? But if you're on the YouTube side of things, let me know in the comments what 5 players are you looking forward to this upcoming season for the Carolina Hurricanes? And do you agree with my assessment with the 5 guys that I have mentioned on the show? So don't go anywhere. In segment 3, we are going to talk a little bit about the prospect roster that was announced by the Carolina Hurricanes for the upcoming showcase that's going to happen in Nashville next month. So, like I said, stick right here. We'll be right back on a Wednesday edition of Locked On Hurricanes. Welcome back to a segment 3 of Locked On Hurricanes, your team every day. So like I said, the Carolina Hurricanes on Tuesday afternoon announced their prospect showcase roster that's going to be in Nashville next month, or in Tennessee next month. And a lot of interesting names that I'm looking that you're kind of knowing that should automatically be there. But there's also some other names that are very, very, very surprising in terms of the fact that some of them are PTOs. But the big names that, obviously that jump off the board pretty much early, Bradley Nadeau, obviously he's going to be there. He's someone that I think has a really good, legitimate shot of breaking into the main roster for the upcoming season, especially when I talk to Nick from Canes Prospects, how we both think for how the roster is currently set up, that Bradley Nadeau has the best shot out of all the prospects to pull a Seth Jarvis and kind of cement his way into the roster for the upcoming season, especially after a year that he had at Maine where he had the most points, goals, and assists by a guy for a Black Bear in a very long time. Felix Unger-Storm is going to be part of the roster too. It'll be interesting to see how he does in his first full season on North American ice. Played in the SHL last year with the Lexans. I'm really curious to see how he does. I'm still on the notion that he should probably be in Chicago next year just to get kind of used to the North American side a little bit more, and especially with a coach like Cam Abbott, who did coach Rogla BK over the last few seasons in the SHL. Noah Gunler is going to be there. Justin Robidas as well. Alexei Himusalmi will be there as well for the Carolina Hurricanes. And the funny thing is, the Hurricanes are going to have 14 drafted players at this prospect showcase. So that's really exciting for the fact that you have a lot of guys who are drafted in the 19 draft, 20, 24, 23. So you're talking about a huge spectrum from the 2020 to the 24 draft, even the 2019 draft as well. So you have 14 draftees coming to this camp, along with some few PTOs and a couple, off at least one free agent. Now, Jackson Blake, he's going to be coming to the prospect showcase as well. A huge season last year, the Hobie Baker finalist for North Dakota Fighting Hawks. I'm really excited to see what he can do. Obviously, Scott Morrow, if you're looking at one of the bigger defensive prospects outside of Alexander Nikishin, who is on North American soil right now, did play some games for the Hurricanes last year. I'm really excited to see what Scott Morrow could do for the Hurricanes. Now, your first PTO is Carter Kowalik, played last year with the Edmonton Oilers in the Kelowna in the WHL. Curious to see how he does. Zachary Lavoie, he is a PTO as well, played for Brantford in the OHL, along with the Niagara, Bulldogs. Kind of curious to see how he does on a PTO. They have Charles Alexis Legault, a draft pick from the 23 draft, played in Quinnipiac last year in the NCAA. Another PTO, Connor Lockhart. He played for Peterborough and Oshawa last year in the OHL. Then you have Gleb Trekasov, who I'm also really excited to see what he can do over here in North America as well after playing for Omsky in the Russian 2 League. He was part of the 22 draft. I think he's someone that could be a very big dark horse, especially how he played in the development camp for the Hurricanes earlier this summer. I'm really excited to see what he can do, and maybe he's someone to definitely keep an eye on for sure as we get closer to camp. Now, this PTO I'm really excited for. He is Raleigh owned, did play for the Charlotte Checkers last year, and that is one Skylar Brendamore. And yes, that is obviously the son of Rod Brendamore. He is coming on as a PTO. Like I said, did play for the Charlotte Checkers last year, part of the Florida Panthers organization. So I'm kind of curious to see how he does. Hopefully he sticks around. Maybe he gets a deal where he goes to Chicago Wolves and stays within the organization. Who really knows? But I think that'd be really cool to see, a Raleigh-based kid, especially to a Hurricanes legend, staying with the team. So that's definitely someone to watch. Brandon McCallum is the other PTO. Played over Peterborough last year in the OHL. Then you go to Anthony Honka, who's another defenseman that you really want to keep your eye on. Played for JYP last year in the Liga. Then you have Luca Testa, another PTO out of Brantford of the OHL. And then Anton Verlote, he plays a PTO as well, coming out of the Royun Noranda of the QMJHL. And then the rest of your skaters are all, playing in. Two of them played with the Chicago Wolves last year in the AHL. And then you had Barry Comeau in the QMJHL. So you have Dominic Finsor coming back, also Ronan Seeley. Those guys are going to be playing in the Prospect Showcase. I'm really excited for Ronan Seeley to see what he can do because he is in the last year of his ELC. He will be a restricted free agent. I'm really hoping he has a great season for the Chicago Wolves this year. I think he's someone who, given with the reunion of the Carolina Hurricanes and the Wolves, I think he's going to have a huge 24-25 season in the AHL. And someone I believe that could really have a possible good chance of making the Hurricanes roster in the near future. And the last guy, of course, is Justin Poirier from the 24 draft, taken in the 5th round. I'm really excited to see what this guy can do. He's supposed to have a really dangerous shot, really good AHL plus shooting already. So it's going to be fun to see how that young guy does as well. Then you give your two goaltenders, Janov Peretz. Obviously he was acquired as a NCAA free agent. Played last year in Norfolk for the ECHL. Really excited to see what he can do. And then you have Rusyan Kazahasev. He played with the Maldivi in the Russian Junior League last year, drafted in 2023. So another Russian defense and Russian goalie that I'm kind of curious to see how he does. But I know that the showcase is from the 13th through the 16th, and that's definitely something to keep an eye on. And I know on Friday we'll definitely be diving into 3 prospects who I should definitely think that people should watch for in that prospect showcase. So make sure to check out Friday's episode of Locked On Hurricanes. Like I said, we'll do more of a deep dive into 3 prospects that we really need to keep an eye on for the upcoming showcase that's going to be in Tennessee in the middle of September. But thank you for making Locked On Hurricanes your first listen of the day. Now go check out Locked On NHL Podcast, where the season never ends, providing national expertise with a local perspective. You can find the link to Locked On NHL in the description, so you don't need to search. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. With that being said, I hope everyone enjoyed the Wednesday edition of Locked On Hurricanes. Make sure to follow me on X at OneTrueZach. You can follow the podcast at LO_Hurricanes. Click the link to my bios where you can check out all my articles at the Hockey Writers. You'd also check out where to listen and watch my other podcast, The Surgecast, on all podcast platforms and on YouTube. And for this podcast, make sure to follow it, like I said, on X at LO_Hurricanes. Click the link to where to listen to this podcast on all platforms. Make sure to leave a 5-star rating and review because that will really help grow the show. And if you're on the YouTube side of things, make sure to hit the subscribe button, hit the bell notification so you don't miss the show. Hit the thumbs up button and let me know if you'd like the show as well. And like I said in the comment section, what 5 Hurricanes players are you looking forward to for the upcoming 24-25 season? And let me know what you thought about the guys that I picked, who I think that fans should keep an eye on as well. And make sure to share this podcast with all other Carolina Hurricanes fans so they become everydayers just like you. Because we are over 940 subscribers. We are on the road to 1,000. And if we hit 1,000 subscribers, I might just do something special for you guys. But like I said, I hope everyone enjoyed the Wednesday edition of Locked On Hurricanes. Hope everyone has a great rest of their Wednesday. And until next time, as always, let's go Canes.